How often have you wondered why certain women, seemingly without putting forth obvious effort, manage to keep men at arm's length, while those very men eagerly work to close that distance? They return after prolonged silence, whereas others exhaust themselves trying to be flawless, waiting endlessly or constantly proving their worth. As someone deeply invested in studying relationship dynamics and archetypal patterns, I recognize that genuine feminine power doesn't lie in relentless attempts to convince or chase, but rather in a subtle grasp of the mechanisms that drive men at their most fundamental level. Most women have heard that men fall for what catches their eye: attractiveness, that initial spark, how promptly you respond to a message. While this might grab their attention momentarily, trust me, it will never truly capture their heart. The real truth runs deeper, rooted in understanding that a man's sense of self forms the foundation of his identity. It's that internal space between who he currently is and who he aspires to become in this world. His sense of self determines how he navigates life, how he perceives himself, whom he allows into his existence, and whom he keeps out. And here lies a secret that almost nobody recognizes. You become the woman whose imprint lingers in his thoughts, even if he never voices it aloud. Type truth in the comments if you sense that attractiveness isn't the main thing. Before we explore the 7 dimensions that will open your perception to something new, I feel compelled to mention one thing. If these words have already resonated within you, allow this space to expand through your engagement. Your energy sustains this journey, enabling me to share what's profound and genuine. Even if your attention is currently occupied elsewhere, let these sounds remain in the background. Your unconscious mind, as Jung described, continuously absorbs. It's always listening. And I promise you, by the end of this journey, you'll perceive men and love itself in an entirely different light. Let's move to the first step. First, nourish his genuine pride, not merely his vanity. Men appreciate compliments, that's accurate. But to truly touch his soul, to evoke love rather than fleeting admiration, you must go deeper. There's an enormous difference between flattering vanity and nourishing pride. Vanity represents superficial, lightweight praise about external things, like how good you look or your attractive eyes. Pleasant, but temporary. It glides across the surface. Pride, however, penetrates to the very core of his being. It connects with his internal sense of self, his innermost value, his gifts, what he strives to believe about himself. When your words reinforce this inner truth, you're not simply making him feel good, you're giving him the sensation of being truly seen. Instead of saying, quote 1, try this. Quote 2, don't say, you're successful. Express it as, you've built something that others only dare to dream about. Here you're touching the depths because he himself yearns for this to be true, even while doubting. And when you see this in him, he begins to believe. Now you're not just one among many. You're the one who sees him as nobody else does. Jung whispered that we search in the external world for what we feel is missing internally. And if you confirm what he's uncertain about within himself, he won't let you go easily. Because when he starts seeing himself through your eyes, you become the foundation of his self-perception. But there's something more. Your words will carry genuine weight only when they come from a woman who values herself and doesn't give herself away so readily. This brings us to the second step, because a man's sense of self seeks not only recognition, it craves the feeling of having gained something truly valuable. Second, allow him to win you over, but ensure he earns it. Understand this. Men don't invest deeply in what comes without effort. They might enjoy ease. They might pursue it. But if you're too open, too quickly, something inside them dims. Often they don't even comprehend the reason, yet it's simple. A man's sense of self builds connection through exerted effort. Jung spoke of inner growth emerging from tension. In relationships, this tension arises when something valuable feels tantalizingly close but not readily available, requiring intentional pursuit. If you give yourself without letting him prove himself, without allowing him to earn you, if you're always the first to initiate conversation, always available, always offering your attention without barriers, his sense of self receives an unmistakable message. I don't need to put in effort. And when there's no need to try, there's no need to grow. Then interest fades. This isn't about coldness or games. It's about creating space for him to step forward. Let him take the reins, seek you out, feel that your attention is a treasure worth pursuing. Don't always respond instantly. Don't solve everything for him. Let him experience your absence. Let him miss your energy, that small void, that silence. This awakens in his consciousness the realization, quote 5. And when he feels he's accomplished something to deserve you, his connection with you deepens, because now you're not just any woman, you're an emotional summit, a union that demanded creative effort. Such attachment isn't easily destroyed because it wasn't a gift, and everything that's won is protected. But there's something far more powerful when you don't just give him a sense of value, but also reflect back the man he dreams of becoming. This changes everything. Third step. Reflect his ideal self, not the man he appears to be now. There exists the version of him presented to the world, and there's another, quieter, deeper one. The man he strives to become, who hasn't yet manifested, but lives in his consciousness as possibility. Interestingly, most people only respond to who he already is, but the woman who leaves a genuine mark perceives what hasn't yet emerged. Carl Jung spoke of the ideal self, the unconscious image toward which every person reaches. For men, this image connects with their hunger for success, recognition, the desire to leave their mark. And when you see this potential, name it, and reflect it back without pressure or exaggeration, it touches his sense of self completely differently. It's not about empty praise, it's about speaking to how he sees himself in his deepest silence. For instance, if he's struggling with his career, doubting his decisions, you might express, quote, 6. Here you're not just validating his feelings, you're shaping that ideal that's still being formed. And this, for a man's sense of self, is like discovering a source of strength. Most people respond to what's obvious. You, in contrast, see what he hasn't yet achieved. This places you in an entirely different category. You become the reflection of his highest version. Jung said, quote, 7. When a man begins seeing his ideal self reflected in you, not because you invented it, but because you genuinely perceive his potential, he starts moving toward that self with greater determination and associates this growth with you. Now you're not just a woman, you're the space where his best version took shape, and this becomes magnetically attractive to his sense of self. Type __, quote _ in the comments if you're ready to see a man's best version. But now let's take another step, because many women believe that challenging a man will only push him away. The reality is this: if you do it correctly, it can draw him closer than you can imagine. Fourth, challenge him without diminishing him. Men, without speaking of it, carry through the world the burden of proving their adequacy, the conviction that they can and must control everything. Often this external pressure transforms into internal struggle, but they conceal it, because showing doubt or uncertainty doesn't align with the image of a strong man that the world expects. And precisely here, in this vulnerable part that opens to few, lives a powerful opportunity to challenge him in a way that elevates rather than diminishes his essence. Carl Jung spoke of transformation that emerges from internal conflict. You can become not a punishing spark, but a beacon of insight. The goal isn't correction or direct instruction, but a gentle invitation toward deeper movement. Imagine he's stuck in a dead end, where words replace actions, complaining without purpose. It's easy to push with a question like, "What are you going to do about this?" But that awakens defensiveness, wounding his sense of self. Instead you say, "I see in you a calling towards something greater, but right now you're frozen, as if you know the path, but can't take the step." Such a response doesn't trigger rejection, but reaches inward. You're showing that you see his essence beyond any failures, saying, "I feel this strength in you, even if you don't sense it right now." Such a call, born of belief, doesn't lock doors but opens his soul. When a man feels seen in his deepest vulnerability without a trace of judgment, he connects with you on such an emotional level that breaking it is nearly impossible. Moreover, he interweaves his growth with your presence. There's no stronger bond than this, when beside you he discovers his true self. To challenge doesn't mean to try to change, but to offer belief that exceeds his own. Now, knowing how to inspire, the time has come to awaken one of the most ancient calls of his sense of self. There's the call to protect what matters to him. Let him feel himself as guardian, even when there's no direct need. Within a man lives a profound impulse toward protection. This isn't only nature, but the essence of his sense of self, creating meaning in his existence. Jung saw the archetype of the protector, the hero that lives in everyone, even if invisible. Independent women often make the mistake of believing that autonomy excludes need, not understanding. Giving him this role without losing yourself is the true path to his sense of self, to emotional depth. This isn't a mask of weakness, but space for his strength. Allow him to manifest his strength in small ways. Listen to his word. Even if the path is already clear, tell him that beside him you find peace not from fragility, but from the tangible reality of his presence. This isn't tactics, but an open door showing him a place beside you where he doesn't solve everything, but complements. Feeling that his influence, physical, emotional, or practical, brings benefit, his sense of self naturally awakens, sensing its value. When he feels his contribution to your life, he wants to stay. The essence isn't your need, but granting him a function in your emotional world. The outcome is profound, and his selfhood intertwines with yours. He feels purpose nearby, senses the significance of his protection. When a man's sense of self sees something valuable to protect, it engages wholeheartedly, because once engaged, it guards what it loves. Type _quote_12_ in the comments if you're ready to allow a man to safeguard you. Sometimes, not his role as guardian, but your ability to gracefully step back touches more deeply, because in this absence, he discovers your true value. Sixth, withdraw at your chosen moment. Let his sense of self seek your reflection. Sometimes, the most powerful way to touch his sense of self is to create distance. When you're always available, always initiating, he doesn't know contrast, and without this shadow, his sense of self doesn't recognize loss, doesn't value presence. Jung spoke of individuation through contrast, silence, separation, which in love resonates more deeply than it seems. Your silence, your space, your pause create an echo capable of conveying emotions when you withdraw with dignity, not as punishment, but as self-respect. Your energy then begins to sound in his thoughts. Memories come alive. He turns over in his mind your words, your voice, your gaze. If you touched his sense of self before, this absence won't remain neutral, it will become profound. This isn't disappearing for manipulation's sake, but creating clarity of feelings, allowing him to experience what gets lost in constant presence. When you calmly step back without drama and reproach, his sense of self feels the void, and this lack awakens the desire to reconnect not with just anyone, but with that one woman who gave this special feeling. Giving space doesn't mean letting go, but allowing his sense of self to miss you. If you were the one who revealed him to himself more clearly, more powerfully, more authentically, your absence doesn't just wound, it transforms him. A man's sense of self cannot bear losing what makes him feel more masculine. But the depth isn't in the longing, but in the fact that upon returning, he'll feel like himself beside you, even in his fractured edges. Such love blossoms only in sanctuaries. Seventh, become the emotional sanctuary he didn't know he was seeking. Every man harbors invisible facets of himself, old wounds, disappointments, fears. Even the most confident hides his shadows. Most often, only his sense of self protects these hidden corners. Jung spoke of the shadow, that part we suppress, fearing rejection. In men, it's often woven from unspoken emotions, sadness, fear, vulnerability. Their deepest desire, though unvoiced, is to find a place where they can stop pretending. Here you enter his world not as a solution or healer, but as a safe presence where he feels he can remove his armor without fear of judgment. Not every woman can provide this, but having found it, a man holds on to such a place like home. You don't need all the answers, only gentleness in response to his cracks. You might whisper, quote 13, when he sees that his pain doesn't frighten you, his silence doesn't distance you, his vulnerability doesn't change your gaze, something inside him melts, his sense of self stops feeling threatened, and in this moment, he begins to truly fall in love. This isn't agreement to disrespect or carrying his burdens, but offering a stable emotional connection, not an impulsive reaction, but support, containment, presence without absorption. Deep trust blossoms in him when he feels he can bear his fragility beside you, and it won't become a weapon. And only in this depth of trust does he allow himself to dissolve. When his inner world finds breath in your presence, when the need for proof disappears, and even in the chaos of his depths, he encounters acceptance, then his gaze sees you as the only one. The world expects fortitude from him, but you give him the gift of being himself. And in this lies the true freedom of his selfhood. Many feminine hearts strive to captivate the masculine by giving themselves without remainder, but he doesn't stay for that, but because beside you, he discovers himself. When you touch his selfhood with understanding, you don't just attract his gaze, you penetrate that sacred part that yearns to be seen, honored, felt, and accepted. Type love in the comments if you embrace this path of depth and trust. And then love stops being a game. It becomes the merging of two worlds.